Hello and welcome to Drama Recaps. Today we dive into the intriguing psychological drama named Don't Worry Darling. Spoilers ahead. Jack and Alice are the quintessential couple in a picture-perfect neighborhood, living a luxurious lifestyle. They feast well, drive a costly car, and bask in the delights of their lavish life. In this community, they interact with several other couples, enjoying each other's company and sharing the joys of life. Every day, Jack and the rest of the men leave for work in the wilderness, while Alice and the other women stay at home, tending to domestic duties. The women remain blissfully ignorant about their husbands' jobs. The men guard their earnings as a well-kept secret and their involvement in a clandestine project known as Victory. While the women know next to nothing about their husbands' work, they don't mind the mystery. The neighborhood's unspoken rules are simple: avoid probing questions and steer clear of the surrounding desert for safety. The women's leisure time revolves around ballet lessons and shopping sprees in upmarket malls. Previously, they were friends with another housewife, Margaret, who they distanced themselves from following a tragic incident involving her son in the desert, which resulted in his death. One night, the community gathers at a party hosted by Frank and his wife, Shelley. Frank is the neighborhood's most powerful man, and the men work under him. The celebration is disrupted when Margaret appears, declaring that they no longer belong in the neighborhood. While most disregard her words, Alice finds them disconcerting, especially when she sees Margaret's husband leading her away to administer a sedative. Alice shares her concerns with Jack, but he dismisses her worries. While preparing a meal, Alice is startled to find the chicken eggs are hollow. Confused and anxious, she decides to head to town for a diversion. On her journey, she witnesses a plane crash in the mountains. Despite the neighborhood's rules, she decides to head towards the crash, thinking she could provide emergency help to any survivors. As she starts her ascent, the scene ends. Alice stumbles upon a striking white domed structure during her expedition. As she reaches out to touch the dome, she is suddenly overwhelmed with vivid hallucinations, before losing consciousness. When she regains her senses, she finds herself back at home with her husband, Jack, in the kitchen, a scene that confuses her, as Jack usually isn't home this early, and she doesn't recall how she got back home. She queries Jack about the events, but he dismisses her account of the plane crash and her journey as a figment of her imagination. Gradually, Alice's life spirals into a living nightmare. She's plagued by recurring hallucinations and paranoia. During a ballet class, she catches a disturbing reflection in the mirror, an image of her former friend's brutal demise. Shaken, she decides to confront Margaret. When she reaches Margaret's house, she finds Margaret on the rooftop. Suddenly, a man in red appears, whisking Alice away. Eager to share her disturbing experiences, Alice waits for Jack to return from work, hoping that he will finally listen to her fears. As before, Jack dismisses her claims as delusional. He convinces her that Margaret was merely cleaning windows and accidentally slipped. Dr. Collins, Frank's partner, corroborates Jack's explanation and prescribes Alice sedatives to help her cope. As Alice collects her prescription, she notices a peculiar folder labeled "Threatened Safety." Intrigued, she decides to secretly take the folder in her quest for the truth. However, she is unsuccessful in deciphering its contents, deepening her despair. She finds herself questioning her sanity, unable to distinguish reality from her hallucinations. The next day, the entire community heads to another party celebrating Victory. Amid the merriment, Alice realizes she can't stand the company of these peculiar people any longer. She pleads with Jack to leave the event, but he shrugs off her request, engrossed in the celebration, especially as Frank appoints him as his partner, a significant elevation for him. Unable to suppress her anxiety any longer, Alice retreats to the ladies' room, where she's joined by her friend Bunny. Bunny tries to gauge Alice's emotional state, noticing her escalating agitation. In the days that follow, Alice and Jack invite their neighbors over, including Frank and his wife, but Bunny is notably absent. During the gathering, Frank confronts Alice in the kitchen, already aware of her conversation with Bunny. He vaguely alludes to the fact that Alice's suspicions may not be unfounded, but he suggests she lacks the capability to fully comprehend the situation. Struck by the cryptic interaction, Alice decides to confront the peculiarities head-on, laying out her observations and suspicions at the dinner table. She notes the uncanny similarities in the couple's backgrounds. They all honeymooned in the same places and were born in the same cities. Despite her attempts to unveil the truth, she is met with disbelief. Her revelations are written off as strange, even delusional. When the gathering winds down and the guests leave, Alice tries once more to convince Jack of the oddities surrounding their lives. She pleads with him to leave the town. To her surprise, he readily agrees. But when they get in the car to leave, it becomes evident that Jack had no real intention of leaving. Instead, he hands Alice over to the men in red suits. Alice is subjected to electroconvulsive therapy under the supervision of Dr. Collins and his team. In her tormented state, Alice recalls fragments of her past, a starkly different life where she was a hard-working surgeon, and Jack was unemployed, spending his days and nights idling on the couch. After the procedure, Alice returns to her life with Jack, her memory of the recent events wiped out. However, her hallucinations persist, refusing to give her peace. Just as it seems she's recovering, the truth strikes her again. The so-called Victory Project is nothing but a simulation, crafted by Frank. It dawns on her that Jack was aware of this all along, and he forced her into this fictional world against her will. Once Jack realizes that Alice knows the truth, he tries to keep her in the simulated universe. He insists that he did it for their collective good. Their real life was destitute and hard, and he wanted to experience a perfect life rather than waste away in their old room. Faced with this terrifying reality, Alice finds herself at a loss for what to do next. Jack reveals the disturbing prerequisites of their unusual community. It appears that the husbands intentionally push their wives into a concealed simulation. The inhabitants are indeed real, but their actual bodies are in a state of coma, controlled by peculiar lenses. Alice yearns to return to her authentic reality, but Jack adamantly refuses to let her go. Left with no other choice, Alice strikes Jack with a piece of glass, causing him to fall dead. News of Jack's death reaches Frank, prompting him to dispatch his men after Alice. The town alarm blares, signaling an emergency. In the midst of this chaos, Bunny, who was long aware of the simulation and chose it willingly, rushes to Alice's aid. She reveals to Alice that Jack is dead in both realities, and no one can disconnect Alice from the simulation anymore. She advises Alice to escape as soon as possible. Emerging into the street in a blood-stained dress, Alice observes the panic spreading among the other husbands. While Frank is distracted on the phone, his wife Shelley takes the opportunity to regain control of her own mind and kills him. Driven by the instinct to return to reality, Alice surmises that she needs to reach the end of the mountain range, to the distinctive white building she encountered earlier. She commandeers the deceased Jack's car and makes a break for it, immediately attracting a high-speed chase from those wanting to prevent her return to the real world. Managing to reach the peak, Alice encounters a living simulation of Jack who pleads with her to remain within the simulation. However, Alice is resolute in her desire to reclaim her authentic life. Rejecting the allure of the simulated reality, she touches the dome, thereby severing her connection to the surreal simulation.